at 9:30 corporate services meeting, and we'll just go right into the agenda and lead off with the managing director's service area update.
Thank you. I just have a few items to highlight committee on. I'm sure you're aware, we have a new CFO starting with us on May 4th, Stansar Nadeem. And we are looking forward to welcoming him to this new role and to the city. So looking forward to that date. I mentioned the Ipsos survey and report. So last time I mentioned that the survey was completed and closed, and Ipsos is compiling the information into the report and the presentation. So we're targeting the April 20th council meeting where Ipsos will come and present the report to council. The report is not intended to come to corporate services because it is Ipsos's report, and they will be doing that presentation to council. So just for awareness of that. Tax auction, that's scheduled for March 31st. So I just wanted to highlight where we're at with the properties on the list. So originally we had 9 properties and 8 manufactured homes. Of course, Denise's team has been working hard with these property owners to make payment arrangements. So we are now down to 2 properties and 4 manufactured homes, and we will continue to work with these property owners up until the tax auction date. So hoping to get that list even reduced further. And then assessment notices were mailed out on February 27th. So customers will have a 60-day appeal period or complaint period. The deadline for that is May 6th. I just wanted to highlight committee that we have seen an increase in the number of queries that are coming in at this time compared to last year. So again, we still encourage everyone to take a look at their assessments and contact the assessment department if they have any questions or concerns.
A follow-up for that, Lola, through the chair. And I know we looked at the assessment maps previously, right? Do we recall what the number was on average increase in assessment? Do we know that, or do we track that? The reason I ask is because when we were in public, like the public conversation right now, obviously people speak when they're affected, and so when we were at trade show this weekend, we had a few people come up to us and were pretty surprised by the amount that their assessment increased. I had a number of those conversations, and we kind of spoke to them about how we went through all the things we talked about. But do we have an average, or do we track that?
We do, yeah. So assessment valuations change based on growth, so physical growth and market value changes. So perhaps a lot of them were looking at their market change because the markets are based on July of 2025. To make sure I had my years right, July 2025. So at that point in time, depending on where the market is at, is where their valuation would have been assessed at. So that doesn't represent what's happening today. It could be worse or better compared to that point, but we do. So like the average residential home increased from 2025, 25,000 in valuation. So it went from 334,000 to about 360,000.
And that's average. So that means there's people there who had a 50 or 60,000.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
And it'll be dependent on, you know, the sales that happened in their areas. When assessment goes out and does that review, then they'll determine it's kind of based on the neighborhoods and areas of the city, right? And they did show that map of where things were increasing like 5 to 10%, and I believe the majority are still around that 5 to 10% mark, but yeah.
Okay.
Just more on that, and I wonder if this is an opportunity for something, maybe not that goes on the assessment notice itself, but maybe when people inquire. Because I remember back to 2013, I don't know if anybody was here then when we had the assessment roll with the commercial, right? You recall, and there was some big jumps in that, and I was on the Chamber of Commerce at the time and we were obviously looking into that closely, but I looked at my own commercial property and I was a little caught off guard too, because I had a 10.5% increase. And so there was lots of people in the same range as me. Some had some significant ones, but one thing that made a huge difference for me that backed me right off of that complaining about that or looking for a reassessment was I was able to just produce a chart, like a bar graph of my increases over the last decade. And the decade itself amount, if you drew a line from start to finish, it was about 10% total. There was 2% years, there was -2% years. So if you looked at it over a range of time, my tax increase was like 1% a year over 10 years. It just happened to be at that jump. So my complaint would have really been I was undertaxed for the last 9 years, right? Or underassessed. So
Yeah.
I don't know if there's an opportunity for somebody for inquiries, if it's something as simple as the data already exists and they can just be provided with a report that shows them, because to your point, maybe a $24,000 jump this year is a big deal to somebody looking at that. That doesn't necessarily mean that their taxes are going to increase incredibly, but that might sound some alarms. But at the same time, if they were able to look at that over time and see, okay, now maybe my area hasn't had a significant tax increase at all, and 24,000 this year versus 2,000 last year or whatever it was might make a difference for somebody. I know it did for me.
Yeah, I know we moved away from reporting previous assessment values on the tax or on the notices that go out. I guess it's the tax notices that would go out. And it is because it is dependent on different factors, right? So it's not, you can't compare where the assessment value is today to what it was a year ago, because again, that would have been based on the prior year July assessment valuation, and depending on where the market was at, what was happening at that point in time could be very different from where it is today. So it's really hard to, look at that and say, why is it increasing? So, but they should call the assessment department. The assessment department can work through their concerns with them and come to an answer. So I would just recommend that they call in and do that. We're happy to help and provide that information to residents.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah.
I just know it's a sticky one, right? When they see that, and yeah, it's challenging. And then you go to negative, you go to okay, well, the city's trying to take more. And it's a tough narrative to challenge, even though if we go back to them, we talk about evaluation and we talk about, the city's not just willy-nilly picking homes and increasing assessment. It's done collectively. It's just a tough narrative. Yeah. So thank you.
All right, and those were all for my updates.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. So we'll move into agenda item, number 2, the tax penalties bylaw.
Okay, thanks. And we do have Denise Schmaltz joining us today, Manager of Customer Care and Billing. So I'll just do a quick intro and I'll ask her to walk us through the briefing note and the changes that are coming. So we are requesting an amendment to the tax penalties rate bylaw to increase the rates from 15% to 15.5% in 2027 and to 16% in 2028. So tax penalties provide an incentive for residents to pay their taxes in a timely manner. Based on the benchmark of the comparator municipalities, the average charges show a higher rate of 16.7% for rears penalties and a lower rate of 14.3% for current penalty. And our recommendation is just to charge one rate for both the current and the arrear penalties. So that's what we're proposing. But I'll ask Denise to go into a little bit more detail on that.
Thank you. And it's through the chair. Tax penalties provide an incentive for our taxpayers to pay on time. And current penalties today are at 15%. This bylaw amendment would be effective for 2027 and 2028. So not for this year's taxes, but for next year's and future years. Residents have the ability to avoid tax penalty by either signing up for the TIP program, the tax installment payment program. And they also can, if they're in arrears, sign up for the TAP program as well. We use the benchmarks of our 7 mid-sized comparators to look at the market value for that. And as Lola had mentioned, we blend that rate so that the arrears customers get charged the same as the current penalty charges. So we keep that rate consistent for that. And our recommendation is always to do small increases to keep up with market rather than large increases.
You have any questions, Stu?
Yeah, through
So-
the chair. I got my hand up. I don't know if you see it. Is there any reason that we can't keep it the same as last year for this increase? Do we always have to raise it up? Is that a possibility to keep it the same for the next couple of years?
Yeah, we could. The problem becomes then when you have to increase, you're increasing it by a significant amount. And so we do want to just have those small increases that occur year over year so that it's not like, rate shock, right? Where now instead of a 0.5%, you're increasing it 2%, which is making, a significant impact. So that's the thought behind doing the smaller increases.
Through the chair, can I also ask how much do we collect on that per year? Is there an estimate on how much we actually collect on that? Is it a big amount? Is it a small amount?
Yeah, you've got that number, I think, Denise, in the briefing note?
Yep.
Do you want to?
Sorry.
Through the chair, tax penalties generated last year, $769,000 for the year. This
Oh.
is included in our revenue, our budgeted revenue for the municipality. So this is why we bring this forward for next year and 2028 in advance so that we know when we're working on the budgets, what the revenue charges would be.
So what kind of explanation do we give to the people when they send out those things that it's going to cost them lots of money if they're late paying their taxes? Do we give them a good note and say, hey, it's better you pay your taxes rather than not because it's going to cost you lots of money?
Through the chair, communication is given to customers through the tax notices. There's a tax brochure included with the tax notice that says what the penalty rate is, as well as on their statements.
Okay, just as long as they're aware of it because it's a lot of money. $750,000 is a lot of money. So good for us, but not good for the people.
Councillor Varga, I'd note too that this is for next year, that on a monthly basis, this is it's going from 1.25% to 1.29%. And then the
Right.
following year to 1.34%. So it's not
It's not big.
it's
no.
not big on if you're looking
No.
at it on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
Councillor Young, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand. Like I see the chart in front of us, going from 1.25 to 1.3%. How does that line up with, and it's a math thing, I get that, but how does that line up with the 16%? So it says the penalty is 1.25, is 1.3 is 6, like, sorry. Where do we get 1.3 from 16%?
Divided by 12.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
On a monthly.
Yeah.
I knew I was gonna make myself look silly by asking that
So, but
question.
there is the chalk one,
Yeah.
July 1st, right?
The big one.
Is
Yeah.
backdated all the way to the start of the
Yeah.
year. So that's a big one. And then every month after. And then if you're looking at arrears, of course, you don't have that shock one. You just have that constant.
That's right. So just to follow up and thank you, Councillor Varga. I think, so I'll just, a couple statements here. I don't think this is an unreasonable increase. I don't think this is a money grab. This is where we've went externally. We've looked at what other municipalities are charging. We're trying to come into the middle. We're making small changes to do that. And I can appreciate that. I think the question I have and other councillors will have is, and just to be clear, this will go to council and council will approve this, right? A couple things that stick out to me. All that being said, is that regardless, citizens don't care what the average is. Like, they're not concerned about, oh, well, we're on average, right? First thing they're going to do is they're going to look at leverage. And they're gonna say, yeah, that's fine. Okay, but what's Lethbridge doing? Number one community we get compared to all the time. And they're gonna say, yeah, but that's fine. Lethbridge is at 12% and at 12%. So they're taking what we're doing, because we're saying that some communities have the current tax penalty at, and then arrears is higher. Well, Lethbridge beats us on both. They have a 12, they have a lower, and they have a lower on current and arrears at 12%. So it's just a hard sell when we look at Lethbridge. I would like to understand, why does Lethbridge do that? And do they just have way more people on penalties, and so they collect more money? And then the other one is looking at, if we change it, that's an increase in revenue of $80,000. So it's an increase, but it's not a big increase for us. I just want to make sure we're at least having the conversation. Back to Varga, to Councillor Varga, I think it's within our right to say, well, no, we don't want to increase it, right? I don't think it's unreasonable that it's being brought to us. And I don't think it's an unreasonable thing to do, but I think it is a conversation that we will have around, what is the impact if we don't increase it? I recognize there's the rate shock, but we can also take another point to say, yeah, we don't want to increase it this year. We could look at increasing it next year, but we're not trying to increase it. We're still going to increase it by a small amount next year. Anyways, sorry, I'm just kind of thinking this through and saying, recognize, I think this is reasonable, but I also think it's reasonable for us to just take a step back and say, is this what we need to do?
No, that's fair.
Yeah, and I guess, I don't know if you have an answer for what Lethbridge does, but I guess this is really an incentive or intended to ensure that people are paying their
That's right.
taxes, right? So you don't want to make it, yeah, like you don't want to say it's okay, you don't have to pay your taxes and we're not going to do anything about it. So it is intended to promote payment of taxes on time. The majority of our residents do pay their taxes on time, and so it is unfair if you're allowing people to be later in paying in their payments without a penalty to encourage that payment on time.
Great point.
And I was gonna say too, that when we talk about people that might not like this, you're talking about a small segment of people. The majority of the population that pays their property taxes on time aren't going to be concerned with this increase. In fact, some of them might think that's okay, because why should they have to pay their taxes on time and somebody doesn't? You know what I mean? So
yeah,
we're not talking about all residents they're not going to be impacted by this, I guess.
1,800, approximately 1,800.
yeah, that's
Something
fair.
like that.
Yeah, that's fair.
And through the chair, just to add the option to go on TIP, so the monthly payment plan, which would avoid the penalty as well. And the city is budgeting on this revenue stream coming in on June 30th to meet their commitments as well. So there needs to be an incentive to pay so that the city can meet its obligations.
And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the kind of clarity on that yeah, it's anytime we see percentages and tax in the same conversation, it just kind of, for everyone, it brings red flags. But yeah, to be fair, we are talking about penalties here. But I think regardless, the narrative, I know I bring that up a lot, but the narrative gets lost a little bit, where it's like all people see is increase tax percentage, Lethbridge lower. And it's like, oh, we're the bad guys. So I think, yeah, we just have to be clear on that. I think we are. What if everyone just paid their taxes on time and we lost out on 1.1, 1.2 million dollars? Like, what happens in that situation?
Through the chair, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, it's a good
because there's a collection activity that also follows with this, right?
That's right.
There is manpower, there's notice production, and effort that goes into following up with arrears taxes.
Yeah, because we're getting those taxes, right? So it's obviously gonna offset the penalty that we would lose out on. That makes sense. To tip, sorry, really quick. Does it, I should know this, I apologize. Does it cost money? Do we pay a fee to go on tip?
Through the chair, if you sign up for tip before January 1st, there's no charge.
Right.
If you sign up between January and June, there's a 2% admin charge on the missed payments.
Yes. Significantly less than your 13-15% on the penalty. Okay, thank you.
Your Managing Director Hutter,
Thank you,
or sorry, City Manager.
Joe. To Denise's point about it being great if they were to pay on time, there are some municipalities that actually provide a discount to taxes if they paid early, like 1% or something like that. So that isn't something that's unprecedented in the province. It doesn't help the narrative, but one point that I think is important to make is if we don't make these small incremental increases, eventually it catches up and then you have to boost it by 3% or whatever just to get to the average market amount. So that's kind of one benefit of these small, relatively insignificant changes annually. Small point there.
Okay. So are we just looking for the committee to support this for council?
Correct.
Councillor Vargas.
Oh,
Sorry,
Councillor Varga?
can I ask a question that Councillor Clugston always seems to ask at tax time? Can they pay it through their credit card? Their taxes?
Through the chair, yes, they can.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I know he always
On-
wants to know that, so.
Yes, if you go onto the City of Medicine Hat's website under tax, there's a tax payment portal that is paid by credit card. The person paying does pay the credit card charges associated with that.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 3, public participation framework progress report and public participation policy. Please.
All right, and we have Colleen Graham, Director of Communications, Engagement and Marketing, and Safira LaChapelle, who's the Public Participation Specialist with us today. So they will be providing a presentation, but just to introduce this. So this is coming forward from a council motion in 2025 where they directed admin to review and revisit the public participation policy to ensure public comments received through engagements are provided to council in an unedited form, that summaries of themes are included as supplemental information, and that clear mechanisms are established in how public feedback is collected and considered in decision making. So the team has prepared the new public participation policy and procedure, and they've also developed a formal framework that they have piloted during 2025. And it's really to better coordinate and implement public engagement efforts. So I'll turn it over to them to walk us through the presentation and the changes to the policy.
Thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. We're really excited to be here and talk a bit more about public participation. So as Lola mentioned, we do have a couple of items to get through this morning. We've prepared a report on public participation that describes our efforts to create a solid foundation for how we conduct public engagement efforts. And we've also brought forward the updated public engagement policy that reflects not only the response to the council motion from 2025, but also our increased understanding of public participation as we have progressed through this over the last couple of years. There's really been a lot of changing expectations from the community, from city council, both currently and in the past few years. As well as just changing expectations from staff too. So the policy updates are attempting to address all of those. Our public participation specialist, Safira, is here with us today. So she's just completed a master's degree in community engagement from the University of Alberta. She started with us in 2025 following the approval of a dedicated position. So historically, we've been attempting to get this public participation framework across the finish line. Well, for the last several years, there was an acknowledgement that this was not a side of the desk activity. So through the 23-24 budget, I put forward a business case for a dedicated role and was really grateful to have that position approved. So Safira joined us in 2024, and it's really been a game changer for how we're able to conduct this activity. So I'm really grateful for that support from both executive and council. So our objective today is to talk a little bit about the fundamentals of public engagement, share where our organization has been, where we are right now, and where we aspire to be in the future. And we're really hoping to get some good feedback from committee as we continue to refine this framework and our practice. So Safira is going to go through the PowerPoint presentation, but I'm going to start with the first slide just to kind of summarize how we got here. So as I did mention, this effort's been underway for the last few years. In 2023, our department undertook an effort to start engaging on engagement. So we actually, we did internal focus groups with our staff to talk about their experiences. We did a public survey with the community that we had I think we had about 700, I can't quite recall, several hundred responses on. And then from those responses, we put out an open call to folks to invite them to participate in a focus group as well. So from those survey respondents, we did 2 or 3 different focus groups. I can't recall. It's getting to be a couple of years ago now. And we also met with the working group for accessibility and inclusion to talk to them about their perspectives on the city's public engagement efforts. So from all of that, we created a What We Heard report that is available on Shape Your City. You can see that now on the public engagement framework page. And then as we moved into 2024, that was when we really started to pick up the pace because we were able to hire that role. So Safira started with us in the first quarter of 2024. Oh, pardon me, second quarter. And by the end of the year, had completed the framework, took that forward to executive for their endorsement. And then in January 25, we talked to SLT about it and said that we're rolling this out in the organization. And then throughout 2025, we've been piloting it. So we're here today to talk about all of that progress, as well as review the policy updates, both in response to the motion from council last fall, as well as our own observations and learnings over the past year. So we're really excited. Safira is going to walk you through the PowerPoint, and then we're hoping we'll have some time to talk about the actual policy updates, as well as some of our early learnings as we've rolled through this framework. But I'll hand it over to Safira, and she's going to really take you through some of the basics of both public engagement and the framework.
Yeah, thank you for having me here today. I'm excited to share this and also hopefully to have a really good discussion about what we are presenting. So I think it's really important to just start with some of the fundamental basics of engagement. We're really talking about culture change here. We're crawling, walking, running. And so some of these fundamental things, we kind of need to get on the same page with those across the organization and externally. So my PowerPoint is really focused on just some of those key things. The IAP2, which we fully follow in our framework and how we kind of do things. This is the International Association of Public Participation, and this has been around for decades. I think started in Australia. They really set the bar for the practice of public participation. So they define any P2 activities as a process that involves the public in problem solving or decision making and uses input to make sustainable decisions. And a sustainable decision could be defined as economically viable, technically feasible, environmentally compatible, publicly acceptable. And we could layer in, strategically aligned, things like that as well. Importantly, P2 is a two-way communication, and as well on the spectrum, you'll often see inform, which is the first sort of category. That's not engagement. If we're just broadcasting information out to the public, we can't call that engagement. That's just informing them. It's the basic foundation for any level that we're on. We need to communicate information. So some benefits of engagement. Number one, supporting trust and relationships between city staff and citizens, serving as a sounding board, early warning, providing a credible channel for communication, helping to increase understanding and support for project goals, encouraging appropriate modification of policies and procedures, may help to reduce costly project delays. Who is the public? The public is any individual or group of individuals, organization, or political entity with an interest in the outcome of a decision. 2 effective ways to identify the public or an interest group or affected group are to consider the extent to which the individual or group or other entity perceives it to be affected by the problem opportunity being addressed, or to list the people and groups that care about the decision and identify their interests and concerns. For any engagement to be equitable, it has to actively seek out those most affected and center those voices. So hearing from different people with diverse lived experience leads to more innovative ideas, better decisions, stronger democracies. However, many groups of people remain underrepresented in engagement processes due to systemic barriers and inequities. And so again, that's where we're moving towards more equitable things there. These are not things that happen overnight. It's also critical to create safe spaces for people to share. Someone with a different viewpoint may not feel comfortable expressing their views in a situation where angry people are debating or sharing in a disrespectful manner. So really setting that tone and thinking about what is a space we're creating where people feel safe that they can share their viewpoints. So barriers to engagement, common reasons people don't participate. There's a lack of clarity in the project, in the influence areas, how their input might be used. There's poor communication or maybe promotion around the engagement, different belief systems, and accessibility issues. It's important that we seek to find the most appropriate approach to support diverse participation. And we cannot expect community to come to us when we don't have an existing relationship. We also cannot just hang out our shingle and expect folks to line up and attend these engagements. We must go to them. So a big foundation of the work that I do in working with, dozens of different teams that have projects that are related to public engagement are making sure we're really clear about our expectations. And what that means is public input is one part of a weave of information that informs decision-making. So scoping the project to clearly define what influence the public has on a decision helps to set expectations both internally and externally. The weave of public participation includes public input, technical information, and strategic priorities. So I want to describe also the value of public input in a project. So I was speaking recently with a skateboarder who described how you can have someone technically proficient design a skate park, but if you don't involve the skateboarders in the design, you can miss designing a park that feels good and is interesting to ride. This is the value of public input that public input can bring to projects. Conversely, public input alone is not the only factor driving decisions. There are technical requirements, regulations, policies, strategic directions, financial considerations, and additional factors that form the borders of any project, or things we might call non-negotiables. Our job is to try to tell that story as clearly as possible, describing the influence areas open to public input and why certain aspects of a project are not on the table. So it's pretty hard to see in the PDF you guys would have received. It'd probably be easier to see this, but the city of North Vancouver has a really good little image here that just describes like everything that goes into decision making. It is there's so much that goes there. So
If I can, sorry, but just to follow up on your example as a skateboarder.
yes,
Obviously, that sticks out to me. And it's not just about, and I really appreciate that example because it points something. It's not just about, having them involved so they feel happy. At the end of the day, what does the city care about when we make our facilities, whether it's skateboarding, whether it's hockey, it doesn't matter even if it's recreation. What do we care about? We care that it's used. We care that it's active. So whenever we put resources into something, we want to make sure it's used. And I can count so many different skate parks in this example that have a lot of money and time put into them, but because they weren't done by skateboarders, it's not just that the skateboarders don't like them, they're not used. And at the end of the day, if it's not used, then that's a failure, right? And so making sure we have proper input just helps to make sure that it's used. But flip side of that, I've also seen communities, it's not any community is not, it's diverse in what they want and what they expect. And the challenge sometimes is creating things where everyone gets their thing, but then you can create something that ultimately doesn't get used because we tried to incorporate too many things, if that makes sense. And this is your specialty. I'm not speaking to the choir here, but that's a huge challenge for us is like, how do we listen to make sure that people have the right input, but how do we not then create something that's a mess because we're trying to do too much with it? Anyways, I'll get off my soapbox.
yeah. Well, you're right. And centering the voices that who would stand to use whatever it is the thing is, and public participation and especially sort of higher and approaches on the spectrum can absolutely lead to behavior change and action, which, you know, in a lot of cases, that is what you're trying to do with the project. Not all projects are attempting to do that, but yeah.
Appreciate that.
So some common misconceptions with public engagement, myth, the same approach to P2 works every time. That's not true. Each project requires a custom approach. Myth, engaging the public in decision-making is abdicating responsibility. Fact, effective engagement retains appropriate responsibility and supports the organization's missions and project goals. Myth, public participation takes a lot of extra time and money. Fact, not all engagement is expensive. Myth, complex technical or specialized decisions should only be made by trained professionals. Fact, effective public engagement recognizes that experts contribute essential information, but that local perspectives absolutely add value. Myth, working with elected officials is sufficient as they have a mandate to speak and act for the public. Fact, quality public participation helps elected officials understand and respond to their citizens' hopes, dreams, issues, and concerns. So our framework, which Colleen mentioned, we've been piloting for the last year after, you know, quite a bit of engagement internally on how this was developed and just thoughtfulness going into it. I won't get into great detail here because I'm going to share 3 success stories and I'll walk through how the framework fit into those stories. But I will say the framework was informed by building on the strengths we have internally here, building on feedback gathered from the engagement work that Colleen and the team led before I started, learning from conversations with my Alberta counterparts and frameworks of other Alberta cities, Grand Prairie, Edmonton, Calgary, Erie, Lethbridge, North Vancouver, etc. Engagement research commissioned by Alberta municipalities and rural municipalities of Alberta when 2018, when all the cities were mandated to have a policy, they hired some public participation specialists who created sort of some frameworks that were helpful for us here. The International Association of Public Participation pillars are part of our framework, and then my perspective from my master's in community engagement. So as I was kind of interviewing different cities and looking at what everybody's doing for their framework, I came to understand that there are many models out there. Some are long, some are short. In speaking with my counterparts, short is the most used. If it's too complicated or prescriptive, it becomes very hard to use and it ends up being just a plan that sits on a shelf. So when I went into kind of designing what we were going to do here, I wanted to keep that in mind and create something that was going to be iterative and used. So first step in our engagement framework is really clearly describing what defines or drives engagement. And this little Venn diagram is the first thing I would do with anyone coming to me and saying, hey, I'm thinking of doing public engagement. And basically, we need to have a yes to one of the external drivers and then a yes to all of the internal capacity drivers. So external drivers could be there's council direction for engagement, there's legislation or regulation, there's perceived winners or losers, there's known concern or risk for an interest group, the issue is controversial, there's an environmental effect, or there's an opportunity for input that would add value. So if we get a yes on that, then we need to ensure that we have internal capacity to do it, because this is sometimes where we could fall short on setting and meeting the expectations and our commitments to the public if we don't have the resources in place to really effectively do the work. So we need to ensure that a decision has not already been made. There's a commitment to meaningful public participation on the part of the project lead and team. There's a willingness to learn and respond to the input. There's adequate resources available, and there's a project lead, someone who's going to get this over the finish line.
Sophia, before you move on to the next slide, can I just add a little bit of something on that previous slide? One thing that I think is really, so I've done quite a bit of training in public participation over the last few years in the as we've tried to improve our practice in this area. And one of the things that really stood out to me in my learnings was that I think historically for many organizations, there's a tendency, if there's an issue coming forward and we anticipate that it's going to be very controversial, oftentimes we'll try to just sort of do it quietly, get it done, maybe no one will say anything. And our instincts around that are actually entirely wrong. If we anticipate that something is going to be controversial, Severe didn't walk specifically through the spectrum of engagement that starts at inform and moves to consult and involve, collaborate, and empower. But the best practice is if you anticipate the more controversial something is, the further you should be moving on that spectrum. So that's when Severe speaks to things like cultural change, that's the kind of thing that we really need to start to work on understanding within our organization, both for our staff, for our senior and executive leadership, and everyone. And that's going to take time, right? Where we have that comfort level that, you know what, we know this one's going to be really messy, but we need to dive into the community and get there, because it is going to be, there's perceived winners and losers. The stakes are high. How do we ensure we develop a plan that really gets to the right spot in that spectrum? So I just wanted to sort of bring that up as just sort of a rule of thumb to be thinking about. The more controversial it is, the further we go on that spectrum.
And I'll just add, I see Councillor Varga has his hand up, but as we move further along that spectrum, that increases time, intensity of the project. So, you know, if we have a really controversial thing and we know we need to go high on that spectrum, we really need to start early. We need to have early communications. Ideally, you're involving people before, like, even just when there's like nuggets of information, because then they're feeling like they're coming along on a process rather than like, you know, here's option 1, 2, 3, and things have already been decided. It, again, really depends on the context, but yeah.
And then just related to that, just one more quick thing to add. Our municipality is unique. With all of our energy assets and some of the things that we are involved in as a municipality, it does create some challenges that are a bit that can't always be addressed through this framework. So some of the most controversial things that we may face, there may still be real challenges in conducting public engagement related to those topics, simply because of a lot of commercial sensitivities or third-party business interests that are represented in that project. So that creates an inherent challenge for our organization.
I know Brian has one. After Brian, I'll just.
Councillor Varga?
Thank you, through the chair. This one really intrigues me. I've got lots of questions. I only wrote 3 pages down in this whole report that you gave to us, so I've got lots of questions, but
Oh boy.
this, I like the fact that you're talking about keep it simple, stupid. We're keeping it simple. The internal capacity, I'm really interested as how we do that. Like, are we good at what we do in the internal capacity department, right? Are we doing a good job of that? Are we, like you said, we try, I got one note where I wrote, stay ahead of what's being put out there, right? Like, if we can stay ahead of the game instead of being reactive after the fact, I think we'll be way ahead in some of these things that are happening within our community. And Colleen, you did say it right. We are different. We are a different community, and newbies that come here and have to learn about our community have to figure out what our system is, because we are one of a kind with the way people think within our community. The other one one of the last slides was our older population has a tough time of getting information to them. So I'm just wondering if we key on that a little bit more so that our older population can get a lot of the information that they can't get like we do on internet and that kind of engagement. So that's a concern for me, because our population is older and not a lot of them have the internet, and they're not on their phones all the time, so they don't get what we get. So I'm just wondering if we're looking into some of that stuff.
Do you mind if I answer that one, Spear? Through the chair to Councillor Varga, thank you for those comments and questions. A couple of things there. The uniqueness, yes, it definitely stands out in our community. The being proactive, absolutely. Some of the learnings that we've acknowledged within the progress report are that it's part of that cultural change where we really need project leads. If they're anticipating something that is going to be a capital project a year from now, 2 years from now, we need to be in on the ground level to be helping them with that engagement strategy. So we really need those long lead times to develop effective plans. For the demographic piece, we do have quite a bit of research to suggest that that gap that you're referencing is really narrowing. We're seeing an increase in preferences from our over 55 audience that want to be notified of things via email, etc. But Safira did mention earlier in her presentation, it needs to be a concerted effort in every engagement plan that we do, that we're finding the people that are impacted and we're finding a way to get to them. So whether that's a neighborhood, whether that's a particular user group or age demographic within the community, that needs to be top of mind for us with every plan we develop.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add to that, Councillor Varga, because I like examples, but we have a project in Simon F. Scott Park right now we're upgrading, and that's older adult neighborhood, like mostly retirement, although there are some young families there. And like, you know, to reach those groups, we did direct mailers. We went around to the facilities. There were 6 facilities that are in that area. We connected with their outreach people, informed them of the project. 2 of them wanted us to come in and do presentations where they organized their group of people. We presented, talked about the project. They became relayers of information to their group for us. And then we've done door knocking 2 times in that neighborhood, directly connecting and talking to the residents, hundreds of residents over a year. You know, and out of all those people, actually, there's one lady, Marge, who doesn't use email and who I deliver stuff to her in paper copy, but hundreds of the others were able to, you know, get the information in email or using our project page. So yeah, we're on it. Okay, so that leads us to Shape Your City. This is our hub for all engagements, and you'll see in the policy update that we've added a definition of roles and responsibilities, and we've added public in there because this is a shared responsibility. It's not just, it's a 2-way process here, and we're asking the public and anyone who's interested in engagement to register for Shape Your City. Registering there, you're going to get email alerts that let you know about engagement opportunities that are upcoming. These, I mean, obviously for projects where we're mapping and we know we have an affected group and we're going to people, but for people who are just generally interested and want to participate, this is a great way to stay up to date on what is going on with engagements. So every Shape Your City page aims to show consistently our promise to the community. We detail the spectrum level. You can see kind of on the project page, it's in the top right all the time. The page will include how public input can influence the project. Both of these things help to set expectations. You know, sometimes we get feedback, well, I don't like it. And, you know, that's not part of the scope often in a project. The scope is, you know, more specific than that. This is how your influence can, your input can influence the project. The platform supports a systematic way to gather and report on feedback from different tools. So we have survey tool, ideas board, Q&A, there's a forum on there. There's a mapping tool where we can collect comments if people, you know, there's a sidewalk crack over here and I want you to deal with that, or this is how this affects me and I'm going to drop a pin because we play soccer in this part of the park and we don't want a playground thing. We want it to be an open field. What I find is there's a lot of people that really care and you can end up with a large volume of information. And so Shape Your City really helps us to pull all that information into one place, export reports, look at everything in sort of a research methods way. We would also post our what we heard reports on there, post any updates to the page. We have timelines, project team information. So understanding our promise, I'm just going to dive a little bit deeper into what we talk about when we talk about the spectrum. So the spectrum can assist in clarifying roles, setting clear expectations, and promoting transparency and building trust. For example, inform is our promise. We are going to keep you informed. Consult, we're going to keep you informed and listen and acknowledge your concerns, aspirations, and provide feedback on how your input was influenced a decision. On the involve level, which you can kind of see with the little graphic, it's kind of going back and forth, the communication. We're going to work with you to ensure your concerns and aspirations are directly reflected in alternatives. On the collaborate level, we're looking to you for advice and innovation in formulating solutions and incorporating your advice and recommendations. And then in Power, we're implementing what you decide. So going higher on the spectrum isn't better than going lower. It really depends on the context of a project and what is appropriate for the scope of influence. The New Zealand government uses the pyramid there to describe thick and thin methods. So thin is easy and fast way for participants to add ideas, vote, comment, include potentially social media, crowdsourcing, idea generation, using prioritization tools. Whereas thick methods, and those would be like our Collaborate and Power, require more participant investment because they encourage participants to read, review, consider content before commenting or sharing their ideas. Each engagement is unique and determined by contextual factors. Each have a place, and the work of planning engagement means understanding what is appropriate for a community and a project, while also recognizing what is possible within the constraints of time, budget, and capacity. Within our framework, which is hosted on our SharePoint internal site and has sort of links off to different resources, we have a list of endorsed engagement techniques and support with finding the right level of a technique. There's kind of a little matrix of scores you can put in there and end up with something. So now I'm going to jump into 3 success stories and we're almost done with the presentation. So kind of success story number 1, Samus Teepee dance floor resurfacing. So this on the spectrum was sort of Collaborate and Power level, and you could see it's high, deep or thick participation. So on the framework, we first looked at, do we need engagement for this project? The Truth and Reconciliation Recommendations Committee heard from the Indigenous community that the shale dance floor at Samus Teepee was difficult to dance on, especially with moccasins. Since best practice with Indigenous engagement is to support self-determination, it was clear that engagement was needed. So then we moved to developing a plan. Parks and Rec secured funding and partnered with CHEM to design and implement engagement. Importantly, a commitment was made to do this in a good way, following the Indigenous community as lead. So 3 goals guided this plan: build relationships and trust with the Indigenous community, working in a good way; create a resurfacing plan that is culturally appropriate and accepted by those who use the space. And we defined that community as the Indigenous dancers and community who are actively using that space, and centered those voices. As well as exploring future improvements to make the site more usable for this community beyond the dance floor. So then we moved to telling the story. The story was shared through ceremony, a formal gathering of elders, including smudge, prayer, and reflection on the site's history and future. Elders spoke to honor the space and guide the project. We then moved to raising awareness. We created a Shape Your City page, but most communication happened through Miwasan, who was our project partner, who really was brought in at the very beginning in determining the plan, building everything. They've been at the table for every single meeting. And we worked through them and their trusted community networks using in-person events and meetings to ensure information reached the right people. So they helped us to develop who are those people that we most need to talk to related to this project. So as we were connecting, this partnership placed engagement at the high end of the spectrum. At Big Eagle, we had, a gathering with over 70 people there. We learned that a guiding principle for this project was for Indigenous people by Indigenous people. Miwasan, as I mentioned, have been at the table to influence all of this, including hiring an Indigenous-led engineering consultant from Guyanai, ensuring the project reflected community priorities. And so the final part of the framework is reporting back and evaluating. And Miwasan acted as a keeper of information, documenting input, reviewing reports. They helped to interpret community feedback, ensured the published reports accurately reflected what was shared. These reports were shared more broadly in the community as well. And this project is still ongoing with ceremony and evaluation continuing as it progresses. So second example is Harlow and Noble. This one ended up on the consult level. And it was kind of in the middle between sort of thick and thin. So we needed engagement because there was a deep utility line that had to be trenched through the neighborhood. Everything was kind of happening very quickly due to realizing that we couldn't trench. We had to take out some trees. So we knew that there was going to be concern in the neighborhood because of this. And we worked on creating a plan. The Harlow neighborhood had recently experienced tension with the city over proposed development. This important context was factored into planning this project and shaped the engagement approach. A community champion was brought in, again, very, very early before we had publicly said anything about the plan, to go through the plan and ensure that the plan was basically like going to work for that community. This helped to ensure trust and transparency. An email list was created. Shape Your City page was developed, explaining why the project was happening and outlining the need for the new park design and the unavoidable loss of trees due to utility installation. The page clearly described how the public could influence decisions, setting expectations for meaningful input. So to raise awareness for this, we had a postal strike. And normally we would do mailers, but the neighborhood champion volunteered with local children to hand out and deliver over 200 notices to homes to kick off engagement. Due to important contextual factors like the recent history and short timelines, I also went around and door knocked to the houses directly surrounding the park, personally explaining the project and inviting residents to participate. Those are the people that would be most affected by construction in a park. And as well as what goes in terms of amenities. For example, people directly surrounding the park didn't want a basketball court because of the noise. They were concerned about lighting, what type of lighting we put in. They don't want it shining through their windows. Those types of things matter. So we make sure we're listening to those people that would be most directly affected. So at the Connect stage, like I said, we were on the consult level. We had multiple surveys moving from big picture ideas to fine tuning detailed designs. We had an open house where people could come and ask questions. We were recording everything through surveys so that, yes, we can have the open house, people can talk, we can take our notes and everything, but we want to make sure we also have this way where your direct words are seen, you can review it and move along in this process with us. And then sharing those results back on the Shape Your City page with our contact list. And this project is still ongoing with evaluation continuing as it progresses. So final one, Facilities for the Future. This is also on consult, and it's kind of an example of a really thin level of engagement. Do we need engagement? This was a council directive and included a 1-month turnaround for results, which significantly impacted what was possible. We developed a plan to help to determine whether to proceed with the final stage or the next stage of funding for Facilities for the Future. Public input was intended to influence residents' perspectives on and comfort level with funding for the project, support for the proposed locations, supporting amenities, highest priority project aspects. So to tell the story, we developed a project page that explained the potential sites, why they were selected, the broader policies, programs, and technical requirements that shaped the decision-making process. With limited time to engage and report back on, we had a really robust outreach and marketing strategy, and you can see those kind of stats up there. Community interest was really high on this project, so it was not hard to sell it. There were tons of people that knew about it and were participating in the survey, coming up to the Q&A sessions, meet and greets. And then, so the survey was an opt-in community-wide survey. We also targeted our region because it was meant to be potentially a kind of destination. So I was out to the town of Redcliffe, Cypress County, making sure that they were aware and their communities could participate. The survey collected quantifiable data on funding, locations, amenities, while also gathering some demographic information to compare representation across the community. And then we shared those results back on our Shape Your City page as well as back to council directly, and sent the information back to the contact list of people who had indicated that they were interested in hearing information on this. So to close, next steps on our end is we're working with our colleagues to educate and support their P2 efforts. We're refining processes as staff learn and grow. We're continuing with coordination and consistency of engagement and events. We're expanding training on the framework foundations and Shape Your City. We're rolling out a key indicator assessment tool to evaluate public participation activities. These are kind of KPIs, which I think also kind of hits on what Councillor Varga was saying. How do we know if we're getting it? Developing external public participation framework communications. We really haven't said much externally on this because we really want to make sure when we are going back to the public and saying, this is what we're committing to, that we can hold up that promise. Because like I said, this is a cultural change internally and we need to crawl and walk and run. So community, and then finally, building community awareness of the key aspects of public participation, some of those foundational things. So just to highlight here, we do have the policy and the procedure changes that are included here. Key changes for the policy include clarifying roles, including the public's, updating the principles so that they're in line with IEP2 values, that's in the policy, and then creating clear procedures to follow, including some of those foundational elements of the framework that's now in the procedures document. And then if you were able to read the full report, we do have an early learning section where we go through kind of 13 early learnings. We'd be happy to have any questions and discussion around the policy procedure changes and those early learnings.
Dumped a whole lot.
Yeah.
Brian has 3 pages. Councillor Varga, did you have some questions?
No, I got 3 pages, but I'd rather just send them to, should I send it to you, Lola? Or how should I do that?
Yeah, if you want to send it to me, we can circle back to you. I can work with
That
the
would be-
team. Yeah.
That'd be great. So, because some questions I got and I use page numbers, but your page numbers don't associate with my page numbers in the report. So, I do have some questions, but I'm sure that you'll answer them all. And I'm glad that this is going on because we always tend to get it where people say that, well, we weren't informed. Harlow was a perfect example with our development that was going on there, that they said they didn't get the information on the development that was going to happen there. So whether it was through the postal strike or whatever it was, right? And whether somehow it got lost in translation because all the people there, even though we did our due diligence, said that they didn't get the information. So I think it's important that we have a great process in place and that we move forward and hopefully we can get as many people as possible. The one question I did have was, how do we watch for the same people always talking to us all the time, that always want to give input, you know what I mean? Because we do have our troubleshooters that are out there that always want to get their input in here, no matter what the process is, right? Do we have a list that council can actually have also so that we can red flag it when we want to answer these people? I don't know how to if somebody could answer that, I'm not sure.
I can take a stab at it. Through the chair to Councillor Varga. I think what you're talking about is one of the challenges that Safira referenced early on in the presentation, is that how do we ensure that loud voices or the same few voices aren't dominating the conversation every time? And that we really need, the best way we can mitigate that is through a solid plan, that we're ensuring that we're connecting with the right people, that we're reaching out to those that are most affected, that we're utilizing techniques and reporting mechanisms that center the voices that matter the most. So that's really just part of the strategic planning of any engagement effort. But it is a phenomenon also, and I think as this council sits in the chair throughout the next 4 years, it is a difficult one to contend with. But I think over time, you start to sort of it becomes easier to discern from the, the consistent voices versus the, their overall community, right?
Yeah,
Because we do
yeah.
want to make sure we're hearing from, we're attempting to hear from get better representation in the community rather than having, the same folks that are hyper engaged, driving decisions.
Just one other question through the chair. A public participant specialist, is that one person in our form, or is it a team that the one person takes with the team to go forward? I
It's a
saw that and
singular
I'd like
person.
to. Sorry,
It's a singular position. It's a singular position right now,
Okay.
Councillor Vargas. So what we've built through this framework is what we refer to as a center-led process rather than a centralized process. So a centralized process would illustrate or would convey that we're doing all of the work on behalf of the whole organization. That's not the case. We're building a center-led process. We go into it a bit more detail in the progress report where Saphira is center leading public engagement on behalf of the organization by, overseeing the framework, defining the processes, consulting with project leads, providing them guidance and supporting where she can. But ultimately, it's still the project leads that carry a significant role in the execution of any public participation plan. So that's what we're trying to build right now. Saphira gave some great examples of her out knocking on doors for projects. That won't always be sustainable. There's only so much of Saphira to go around.
Yeah, I just think it's important that maybe a good conversation with council around this and knowing our direction and how to move forward with some of these questions that we get asked too, as to what our protocol is and our process is, because I think it's important. We get entangled in this and our emotions get high, and then we want to answer these people back right away, but we really don't have all the information. So I think it's important that we pull that all together first before we actually, my wife says always, don't snap back at them, take a time out. You know what I mean? The time out, make sure that you're up to snuff on what you're going to comment back to the person, that it's not emotional. So I think we can get better at that, right? Because some of the stuff that we get is crazy. So
that's a
thank
great
you for that.
comment. Absolutely. And one of the things that we have built as well, Saphira spoke to the role of the public in engagement practice and how we've tried to describe their role and the commitment that we hope to see from the public within the policy. We've also established draft terms of engagement for the public. So essentially, if you're a member of the public that's participating in a certain project or initiative that the city is putting forward, you're making a commitment as well to follow a certain terms of engagement. Your participation, we're hoping it's respectful and constructive and all those kinds of things. So that draft terms of engagement is included in this package today as well.
Yep. Thank you for that.
If I could add one thing as well, because I think what's really important is, we're moving along in this and there's going to continue to be iterations and we're going to get better at it. But it's having that trust in the process that also gives you guys confidence when you're making decisions, because there's always going to be people who, we go through a process and we're informing them as much as we possibly can, sometimes knocking down their door to the point where they're like, you again, what are you doing here? I don't want to participate. I can't force people to participate, but people sometimes will not be interested in, say, a higher level conceptual thing until it's hitting the construction or hitting a phase where, okay, now things are actually moving. And they chose not to participate, or they weren't signed up, they weren't on the right channel. And then they're coming along at the end where we've moved through a process with a group of people who, we identified were key stakeholders, and they're saying, wait a minute, we didn't hear about this. And that can, if we're centering those voices, that can blow up, a whole project and those voices that were along for that ride. And so, we're trying to move to a place where we have trust in the way that we're communicating the work that's being done. And I'm very open to, what is going to be helpful on your guys' end to help make those decisions and show that, we have we have done outreach and we have tried to reach the people who would be most directly affected by these decisions to ensure those voices continue to be heard throughout decision-making processes. Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, I really like hearing the part about how it's focused, like when you talked about Harlow, for example, and it was very specific to that neighborhood. I've always had a bit of a concern if we just have a survey online and anybody can fill in, give their input and it has equal weight, when it's really, you know, does it matter to somebody as much in Southridge as somebody that lives in Harlow? So that's for me is big because it's the neighborhood impacted, right? I'd want to have more impact about my neighborhood than somebody across town, and my input really isn't that valuable to somebody's park on the other side of the city, right? So knowing that, and I think just knowing that, like for me anyway, knowing that there's a process for this and that stakeholders, there's a real effort going out into contacting the stakeholders and trying to get their feedback and their input, and some are not going to participate and they're going to wait till the end and complain that they never had a chance to, and we know that that's going to happen no matter what. But to know, you know, to sit in my chair and know that that opportunity really was there for feedback and input and you chose not to, I'm much more comfortable with the decisions been made based on the feedback, based on participation from those who wanted to participate, I think is for me very helpful. Yeah. Councillor Varga?
Thanks again. Sorry for being a pain here, but I think this whole process is going to work great in our transportation master plan moving forward for when we have to get into it real hard and heavy with the people that are down there. And you're talking about that, the people that are involved. So I think it's important that we do a good job of this and that it moves forward and we have a good outcome in the end with what's going to happen down there. So I think this is great. What's happening here, and I hope we hit it at 100% when we move forward with it. So thank you for putting all this information out to us.
Thank you, Councillor Varga. I would just add to what I said too, is it gives me confidence in responding to those concerns. I have confidence that like due diligence has been done and we're proceeding in that direction, and everybody won't like it, but that's where we are, right? Councillor Young?
Yeah, appreciate it. I pull from this, and I know there's a ton of time and effort that's put into this, and I really appreciate it. So I'm not trying to simplify it to the effort that's been done, but if I'm trying to pull like the main theme out of this, it's like, this is really important. This is important how we engage. We're a city and our customers are our citizens, are our customers. Like we're not just like a outside business, like it's much more complicated. And so how we connect with people is super, super important. It's not just telling them, it's engaging them. It's all that kind of stuff. So this is really important. We can't just do it ad hoc. We can't just hope for the best and do things that we used to do. We have to be strategic in how we're doing that. And that's what your team is doing. And I really, really appreciate that. And so, and even as you were presenting, I'm on my what is it? Share your
Shape Your City.
Shape Your City. Sorry, because I just went on a different one real quick. But and so just looking at all of it, I really, really appreciate that. I guess the question I have, will this presentation go to council? Like how, or is it just for information? The only thing I'm worried, not worried, but if we go to council, sometimes like sometimes the message can get lost a bit in the detail. So I guess the question is where does this go from here?
Do you want to take that one?
Through the chair, I think we're still kind of working with Mayor Clark to see how she would like the agendas formatted.
Okay.
What we've landed on so far is that presentations will be presented to council during kind of thinner meetings, I suppose. So we're going to try to be strategic in placing presentations on agendas where you know, where they fit well, rather than kind of just shoehorning a presentation into the following council meeting.
Yeah.
So we'll hold on to it, see when we have a good opportunity to present.
Okay, appreciate that, because the other one, sort of, go ahead.
There is an RFD with this piece as well, though, related to the policy. So the presentation piece that MD Hutter spoke to, that acting city manager Hutter spoke to, is just don't want to lose sight of the fact that we of policy proposed.
Yes, and sorry, when it is attached to an RFD,
Yeah.
we will have an opportunity to present, but just a pure presentation will be typically kind of pushed down into.
I just think like, if we can, yeah, and that's your job, but I think to nail the big, like, to make sure that that it lands as best as possible is to simplify it a little
Yeah.
bit. Like, obviously for us, this is important, but I think when it comes there, simplify it. And I really appreciate, it's 56 in our pack, but 25 in your report, which is just how can city council and executive support P2, right? I mean, that's the question I'm always asking is like, okay, how does council support? And you identify 5 specifics there, which I really appreciate. And I think if we're going to council, I know that's going to be like the question that gets asked. And so putting that kind of at the end or somewhere where we can really dive into that, I think is good. So really appreciate the work.
Yeah. Okay, I think that, so this is again, this will come with a presentation at the next meeting because it's a
Yeah.
decision.
Yep, I
Yep.
think we will have the presentation maybe simplified and
Yeah.
a little bit more direct on how council can support the process. But yeah, it'll come forward for council decision on April 7th.
Excellent. Okay, and then action item number first, sorry, agenda item number 4 is action items, and I don't believe we have any currently.
Correct. We don't have anything this time.
So unless anybody has any other business, not seeing any, then we will adjourn. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.